Good morning, and welcome and congratulations on getting up this early. We have a ginormous session for you. We have Charlotte Moore coming on, and then all of the different genre heads representing BBC One. But before we meet Charlotte Moore, let's have a look at some of the highlights of the last 12 months on BBC One.
Thanks very much.
Hi Charlotte.
Hi.
Morning.
Hi.
Just talk about that montage for a second. What stands out for you in that montage that we just watched?
God, I'm so proud when I look at that actually in the thing, and also that's thanks to all the brilliant producers that we work with who make those shows.
Yeah.
But it's the range, I think, isn't it? It's the quality, it's the range, it's some of those pieces that really stand out to me as sort of event television, where you realise everyone, remembers them. It's what defined, I think, the channel over the last year. So no, I feel incredibly proud of the programmes that we've done. And
it is still event television. It's still, the huge mass audience channel. It is still a channel at times where people come together to watch major events, which also brings me on to the One Love concert following the terrible attack in Manchester. You cleared the schedules. That show went out, I think, less than 2 weeks after what happened. I think it got 9.5 million viewers with a couple million more on iPlayer. Just tell us a bit about how that happened. Take us inside that decision.
Look, I think, if BBC One is the channel that really brings the nation together around that sense of shared viewing, and whether that's, the Rio Olympics or whether it's a new series of Dr. Foster where you've got people really wanting to kind of, can't wait for that moment. I think it's having that finger on the pulse of how people are feeling. And obviously, the horrendous attack in Manchester, absolutely shook the nation. And I think when, I got the call from I was trying to remember now when I got the call from David Joseph saying, look, we want to do a concert, Ariana wants to go back, we're going to pull this together, what do you reckon? I said, absolutely, totally committed, let's put it on, let's make it happen. You tell me when, you tell me where, and we'll do it. But that, that is my responsibility, and I think absolute, duty, actually. We're a licence fee payer, public service broadcasting. If we're not the people that can say, let's bring the nation together and let's really kind of mark that moment and pay tribute for the, horrendous kind of what happened for those victims. And I think, Ariana, obviously, I thought it was an incredibly brave thing for her to do. I thought if she's going to be brave, God, I'm going to follow suit.
Absolutely incredible.
So, everyone was totally behind it. And, it was fantastic watching the studios, BBC Studios team, who then worked with David to make that happen. Because, we didn't know who, we didn't know how. But it was great.
But that kind of
flexibility, privilege of running BBC One.
Exactly. But that flexibility in scheduling is quite rare, isn't it?
Look, I think increasingly, we're in a fast-moving world. We know that there's so much choice for people. There's so many. For us to feel like we've got that finger on the pulse and that we're really talking to people and reflecting their lives, but also marking those moments that they really care about. Yeah. I think. Yes, there's lots of opportunity out there. There's lots of choice for people to watch when they want to watch. Yeah. But I think there's such a huge appetite, and you can see that. We've had our best. We have a biggest share in a decade on BBC One, and actually, also biggest share for 16 to 34s this year, which growth year on year. And you kind of go, we all know how difficult that is, as I say, with all the competition out there. So I think that appetite for people to come together and watch, together, is still there.
BBC One is the most watched channel among 16 to 34-year-olds, I think.
Yes, it is, absolutely.
The fact that probably not many people actually.
It's the most watched for 16 to 34s. It's it's the most watched channel of the nation, and that's where we have that responsibility to mark those big national moments and indeed to create them. I like to feel like, with Wild Alaska a couple of weeks ago, that's as important to me to really bring those events and create those events. Dr. Foster, which is coming back in the autumn, I'm incredibly proud of that. It's the most exciting, my God, it hits the ground running again.
Does it?
It's just extraordinary. 2 years after, and we then meet them 2 years after, and it's and off we go. And I think creating that event television, I think that's what our audience is. They want to be surprised, they want to be delighted by programmes that they can all talk about.
We'll see a clip of the new Dr. Foster a little bit later. Let's just talk about gender pay for a couple of minutes. I imagine you were looking forward to this. But let's just get this one out of the way, which is, first of all, when the pay disparity was revealed, what was your personal feeling about it?
Look, obviously, as a woman, I absolutely agree and fight for gender equality. And I think you only have to look at what we've done on BBC One over the last 4 years to see my commitment and dedication to equality for women with, you know, strong female leads in drama, from Sarah Lancashire to Tandy Newton to, you know, entertainment with Tess and Claude on Strictly, Mel and Sue doing the Jen Game. And indeed, people like Lucy Worsley, Mary Beard, making sure that women are absolutely at the heart, and women experts and female talent are right up there. So I totally committed to that. And I think, you know, I don't think anyone expected, I think the talent disclosure that the government asked us to do was for one reason. The byproduct of it was to see the gender, you know, pay issues come out. It's something we were already working on. It's something that, as I say, we're already very aware of. Yeah. And I think if you put it in context, you know, the BBC has a gender pay gap of, I think it's approximately 10% at the moment. That's a lot better than a lot of other organisations. Of course, we've got to get better, and you know, I think the fantastic repercussions of all of this is that Tony Hall said, right, by 2020, we're going to close that gender pay gap.
But it's a big gap.
And I think that's a big message.
But in terms of top talent, there was a significant gap there, wasn't it? I mean, I think 2/3 of the highest paid people were men, and
I think that list obviously shows a partial story. As we've said, you know, it only shows a story of the top earners. And I think if you looked at that, some context behind that is that of the people who've sort of, you know, come into that list for the last 3 years that have been promoted, you know, 60% of the women, you can see there's a change going on. And I think, you know, our commitment to close that gap and to make sure, you know, it's also very complicated because what you see there is only a partial story, and indeed, what does it represent in terms of what days they do, what job they do they do other jobs on top of it? So it's a complex
It's a partial story, but there was still an issue there, and there was still a gap. And you know, you've talked there, you know, very well about what you're doing to address that and what you've done in your job to address it. But what was your feeling about the fact that it has happened, you know, historically?
Well, I think we all know culturally, anybody who lives in the UK knows that this has been an issue for some years, and I think, you know, it's great that this is all being outed for people to really kind of have that conversation and make sure that we set targets that we meet. And once and for all, you know, I mean, women got the vote in 1918, that's nearly 100 years ago. I'm like, you know, we need to make sure there is equality. I would also say for me, yes, it's about gender, but my God, it's about diversity in a broader sense too. I don't really look at that and think this is just a gender issue. I look at all of that and go, this is also, we need to make sure that the talent at the top of the BBC, and that's off screen and on screen, you know, represent modern Britain. If we're going to be a broadcaster that reflects the nation, we've got to make sure we reflect the nation off screen and on screen.
What kind of problems did it cause internally, if you want to share such a thing? As in, you know, those numbers came out, there were female newsreaders that we can all name who weren't on the list, and male newsreaders who were earning a lot of money. And I was talking to someone who runs another BBC channel, and they were telling me that it had been a nightmare, and they described it as like a sack of snakes had been released into the office. And I wondered, for you, some of them
with an iguana kind of.
But were you getting calls from agents? Were the talent ringing you up angry? What was it like? Tell us about what happened inside.
Look, clearly this is a topic that anybody who's a woman particularly feels very strongly about, and obviously there are sort of both personal issues, and then there's also us trying to go, let's really work out how we're going to do it. I thought the biggest message for me, because this again, gender pay is about across the whole of the BBC. You know, by 2020 to say you're going to close it, that for me is a fantastic public statement, and I guess the fact that was said very quickly is a great message. So of course, for many people, this is caught up in
and did it create problems? Did it create problems internally?
Well, you know, clearly we're all addressing it, and I want to kind of make sure that people feel that we are really addressing it properly. And of course, we'll address it in various different ways. There isn't a one size fits all. There isn't a sort of this is the solution I can say now. We're going to have to look at opportunities as they come up. We're going to have to really, as I say, it was something we were doing already. It was something we're very aware of, but it's not something that you can just go, right, by tomorrow I'll have sorted it. It's, you know, this is a big issue. And to put it in context, I would say to everyone in the room, I think the BBC, yes, we're absolutely right to be at the vanguard of this, but my God, we need other broadcasters, we need other institutions, other companies to follow suit, because this is a big cultural issue.
Do you think other broadcasters are not doing well enough on this issue?
I think all of us need to take that commitment. I think if we're going to do it, this is society's issue, and the government are taking it very seriously by asking people to publish these kind of, you know, things which will all come out next year, and we'll be able to see, you know, data will reveal exactly where we've got to. So, you know, I think absolutely as women, I feel very passionate about this.
Okay. Let's talk a bit about the Great British Bake Off. It's about to launch on Channel 4. Did you commission Bake Off? Was that your own commission?
Yeah.
Oh, well done.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thanks very much, Richard. Yeah.
It is. I mean, it's an absolutely extraordinary hit, isn't it? Did you get like 14 million viewers, I think, the final last year? Before we talk about Channel 4, why does that show work so well? What do you think? What's the essence of that show that makes it a success?
Look, I mean, competitive formats have had a long history of being, and competitive formats about food. We all know there's a real appetite, should I say? That's another pun. But we know there's a real appetite for that. So we know, but there's something about, isn't it, creating that drama on screen, creating that moment where you really care about the detail. And I think it really believes in what it's about. And I think if I look at some of the shows we've got coming down the line, I think creating shows where people feel utterly involved. Again, where they feel involved because it's something that matters to them, because they, it's something they can really relate to. But it's also where they get really involved in the competitive element. We all know there's a strong tradition of that, from Apprentice to MasterChef to Strictly. These shows, you get really caught up in the drama of the moment.
Sometimes there's a bit of luck, isn't there? Just sometimes all those ingredients come together.
Oh my goodness, luck! Yes. So if I knew what and let's be really honest, when you commission shows like that, you don't know right at the beginning it's going to be the hit. It's often the one that you think was going to be the hit isn't the hit, and so these things pop out and these things grow, and there's a chemistry behind them, and so no, there's no magic ingredient for them. Otherwise, that wouldn't my life be so easy.
Why did you lose it? What happened?
Look, I think all of that, I've spoken about it lots of times before, I wish them well. In the end, we had to make very difficult decisions about, I feel very responsible for licence fee payers' money. There's a moment when I simply cannot pay any more for a show that will stop me doing all the other great things. I'm here to take creative risks. I'm here to create new hits. I'm here to push the boundaries of what mainstream television can do. And if I feel that I'm going to be stopped from doing that by putting all my eggs in another basket, in the end, I've got to make those very difficult decisions. And that, again, that is my job to do that. But, do you
think they were ungrateful to the BBC?
Sorry, who?
The Love Productions in taking it away from the BBC.
Look, we all know the decisions and why they made the decisions that they did, and I think that's, I wish them well, and obviously, of course, it was a difficult moment, but I wish them well. But at the end of the day, I've got to get on with the job of being the channel that is there to take creative risks and push the boundaries and continue to come up with the new, and that is what I think we've been doing, and that creating that creative headroom for everyone's only going to be good for everyone in the room. We've got a huge appetite for lots of new shows.
And of course, there's a limit to how much you can pay for these things on the BBC.
Absolutely.
I hosted the launch of Bake Off on Monday at Channel 4, interviewed the cast, and I watched it. And it's kind of exactly as good as it was before. It's a good show. But one thing that came up, and that has come up a lot lately, and there was that headline in The Sun, which was a feeling, I don't think it's certainly not my feeling, but certain newspapers have been suggesting that the BBC is basically trying to rip off Bake Off with new cookery shows. You've seen those headlines, obviously, right? And what do you say to
wait
them?
until you see our new shows. There's a strong tradition of cooking shows on the BBC. We've always made those. Before Bake Off there was MasterChef.
Yeah, no.
Listen, let's wait and see the shows.
Exactly. It is, in the end, it was a competition format with weekly challenges and two judges, and they were hardly the first one to come along. Tell us a bit about, you talked earlier about 16 to 34-year-olds, and you gave an interview to Broadcast, and you were talking about, you've got to find that next generation. What does that mean in BBC One terms? Who is the next generation of BBC One viewers?
BBC One is a big, broad, mainstream channel that's got to cover universal subjects that we all care about, right? It's a channel, as I talked earlier, about bringing the nation together. Well, it's also a channel that really celebrates all we have in common. We're a big, diverse nation, but it's actually about uniting people around programmes to kind of really talk about things people care about. So clearly it's a big, broad channel. Of course, we know that the segment of the audience that you know, have got lots of choice and they're going elsewhere, and that isn't just television, that's gaming, that's social media, that's all the other things that can, you know, for eyeballs to be kind of fascinated by. You know, we know I've absolutely got to make sure that they feel that BBC One is still a channel that matters to them. And of course, you know, it's the biggest channel for 16 and 34-year-olds. It does matter. I've always said every week of the year there's got to be something for everyone on BBC One, something that, you know, whether that's the news, whether that's Question Time, whether that's EastEnders, it's whether that's Country File, you know, serving that big broad audience. But of course that segment of the audience that we know are going elsewhere, that absolutely has to be something that we really take note of. And what's been great actually in the last year is alongside those big shows that we know they really come to, as I say, The Apprentice, The MasterChef, we've also created some new shows which we know that they're loving, and that's Ambulance, which starts tonight. That's Moorside, that's Three Girls, you know, and the shows, and that's Planet Earth too. So some of the shows that have really cut through in enormous numbers with those young audiences, also I think really buck a trend of perhaps what people might think young people want to watch. And I think, exactly. You know, any of us who work in television know, you know, do not second guess what you think young people want in some lowest common denominator. You know, young audiences love complexity. They are incredibly sophisticated about their watching. They really want to get into a piece and they love that kind of talkability as well. So, you know, what we're very focused on is making sure that our shows really speak to them.
You were talking in your broadcast interview, you were talking about, I guess, a degree to which the systems and the process have changed and the way that the different people running different channels and departments now don't compete and they work together. Just tell us how that's impacted commissioning, because there'll be people in the room here who, you know, want to come to you and want to pitch shows. Has that process changed? Has it got any quicker? Has it been streamlined?
I think, and obviously, you know, I mean, I think the basis behind it is to make sure that as a broadcaster, we are absolutely audience focused. We're about making shows that then can make the biggest impact with our audience. So rather than thinking separately and me only worrying about BBC One and, you know, Patrick only worrying about BBC Two, by working as a team, recognising that we're all creating great shows and we all want to understand what the other ones are doing and how things are doing and who's watching what, is a really creative way, I think, of both for talent, I think for suppliers, and I really hope for the commissioning process that it makes it a much more fluid, flexible, quick-moving. I absolutely think it's quicker. I'm not saying for everybody that might be, please do let me know if you feel things are getting held up in the system. But I think those conversations are happening across genre and across channel, and we all know what the other one's doing, and we all kind of discuss what we're commissioning and how we're commissioning. So I think it's also very important that we're much more flexible, that we're much more, you know, we can change with the times and make decisions very quickly, that we don't take a year to debate a decision and then the moment's moved on. You know, we've got to be in touch with the audience, we've got to be in touch with the moving times. So I think it's changed the way we work, it's changed the whole culture of the place, if I'm honest. Great. And again, you'd have to talk to the controllers about it later. But.
Well, yeah, we're going to bring on, so we mentioned their different genres, and we're going to bring on, I think it's the first time we've done a sort of controller session like this, right, where we're going to have a lot of people. We're turning it into a sort of talk show, a little chat show. We're going to bring on various different genre heads, and we're going to start with Shane Allen, who is the head of comedy commissioning at the BBC. And before Shane comes out, we're going to have a look at some new comedy. This is new comedy coming up soon on BBC One. Hello, Shane.
How are we doing?
Good, thank you.
You've changed.
From what? From when?
I remember you, Big Breakfast days, you used to be this sort of affable, bumblefuck kind of guy. And now you're giving it the full John Humphreys on Charlotte.
No. Was that really? Oh, no, I wasn't being too confrontational, was I?
Jesus.
What was that music? I thought you were going to come on to Eye
it's
of
like
the
a pub
Tiger.
quiz.
I thought we were
Does
going to
anyone
be...
know what that music was?
Yeah.
Steptoe and Fan, very good.
By the way, in many ways, I'm still a bumblefuck. It's just an act for the morning.
Lovable.
Yeah.
Lovable.
Shane, let's talk about what we've seen just there. Tell me about Porridge. That was exciting to see Porridge come back.
Yes,
Tell us
Kevin
a bit about
Bishop
that.
doing a So we did a sitcom season last year, and we sort of didn't want to do too many retro revival pieces, but Porridge came out of it really well, and Dick and Ian, who wrote the original, who wrote Like Lads and Porridge, they're these sort of master craftsmen, they had enough ideas to do a series. Kevin Bishop does his sort of grandson of Fletcher, so spirit of Fletcher, but he gives it his own spin, and Kevin's going to be a big star.
He's a super talented guy. I mean, do you get particularly nervous about when you bring back, let's call it, a heritage brand like that, where there's so much expectation and so much love for it, that's the sort of thing that people are kind of waiting, they're waiting for that kind of thing to fail to some extent?
I don't know. They went really, really well, those sitcoms, and we do Still Open All Hours.
Yeah.
And there's still this Roy Clark. You know, you get these guys who are kind of top of their game writers. They've written brilliant shows. So if he still wants to do, that's his legacy. Yeah. It's not, you know, it's not. I wouldn't get in the way of that, I don't think. And the shows are loved. At the end of the day, the judge and jury is the audience. So 6-7 million people watching Still Open All Hours.
Amazing, isn't it? Charlotte, do you think this is sort of the hardest genre to get right? In a way, in terms
no,
of
I think, you know, comedy is something it's so kind of driven by the writers, the talent, what they want to do, what they want to say, the precincts they want to work in. So yes, I think it is. I think it's the hardest to know what's going to work and what isn't, because you go to a read through and you kind of look at it on that, and then you kind of see the next stage, and then you know, it's listen. I think it's really hard, but I think, you know, we've had amazing success. You look at, you know, fantastic hits like Still Open All Hours, Car Share, you know, doing bonkers projects like Mrs. Brown's Boys Live last year. You know, where we're really, and you know, Shane, I thoroughly enjoy. It's the genre where I kind of feel like we jump off cliffs several times a year, where we go, right, let's do it. And you know, and it's also been great, actually, I think, encouraging talent to want to be on BBC One and to show people that we are taking the risk, and that actually we positively encourage that. And the comedy playhouses that we've been doing has been a great way of sort of making sure that we're trying lots of different things.
Do you think it's hard as... Sorry, Shane.
I just said people do get, weirdly, I came from Channel 4, BBC One's the one you get least pitched to, because people get quite intimidated by that. So it's trying to create those zones and those spaces like a comedy playhouse to say, don't be afraid. And people sometimes think BBC One, you have to sort of tone things down a bit, be a bit more anodyne or whatever, and you think, well, the legacy of BBC One is Royal Family, Outnumbered, things that were quite dynamic and experimental. And even Car Share, I remember when Peter Kay pitched that, he said, look, this sounds really boring. It's two people in the car going to work and then coming back from work. And it was his sort of, he was behind the idea of kind of premiering it on iPlayer. So that thing where people could sample it and get to love it, and you don't have that big critical backlash that kind of can sometimes strangle a programme too early.
But I imagine you're right, though, that it's an intimidating thing to pitch a comedy for BBC One, that if you are writing or creating or producing comedy, that you think, well, I'll take this to BBC Three, I'll take it to Channel 4, that they seem more like natural homes for comedy, and that somehow coming up with a massive, because it still has to, yes, you're right, of course BBC One's had things like the Royal Family, but it's got to be a mainstream hit. It's BBC One, right? It's for everyone.
My contrived analogy is Glastonbury main stage Saturday night. That's what it, you know, you want the big talent, the big names, but also Glastonbury main stage, you have the support slots, so we have things that we can launch, like the comedy playhouses will play after the news, so there won't be that massive pressure. It's got to get 3.5 million, and that's what we can grow things in the shade a little bit more. So trying to encourage talent, like we did one of those, it's not on that reel, but Rob Beckett's done a pilot. And his thing was BBC Two single camera. You go, no, Rob, you play arenas. Please do a studio sitcom. Please write that thing. You've written loads of jokes. It's a bit like Lee Mack. Lee Mack was the first sitcom after The Office. And it was like, oh, this studio sitcom's dead. It's over. It's finished. And Ben Elton does this talk tomorrow night on BBC One, the Ronnie Barker talk, about how populist comedy is sometimes critically panned, and we just need to get over that.
But look at Not Going Out. I mean,
Not Going Out, 10 series.
Brilliant new series, and you know, next one's looking cracking too. So.
Fantastic. Shane, tell us the difference between commissioning comedy for BBC One and commissioning comedy over at Channel 4. What is it?
It's a lot tougher with me, isn't it? Is it?
Yeah.
It is, isn't it?
Do you know, genuinely, this is going to sound, but because it is pure public service, it commercially doesn't, it's a high risk, high cost thing. So ITV, even yesterday, was sort of saying the prospect for scripted comedy is bleak. And I know when I was at 4, our budget 1 year halved because the downturn in the ad market, and comedy's sort of the first thing that gets cut because it's seen as maybe a bit frivolous or a bit of a luxury item compared to the kind of more heavyweight genres. And we talk about this a bit, and I fight against that a bit. But I know exactly what we're going to do. 12 series next year, the year after that, year after that. We're going to do all the Christmas specials that we do. So there's quite a lot of autonomy as well compared to maybe before, because you've got more range to take stuff. You've got pilot things on every channel. We've got the comedy playhouses on 1, new on 2 on 2. We've got comedy feeds. So the stuff you can try, and we can get it on its legs. And with Charlotte, it tends to be more. We talk about. I'm getting emotional. Sorry. We talk about
Is it late night?
Strategy. Never not this early in Edinburgh in my life. We talk about the strategy of, like, Charlotte V. What's the kind of what story do you want to tell in comedy this year? What's the diversity element to this? What's the nations? What's the regions? So bigger kind of big picture stuff. Yeah, it's fair, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And then we have the pleasure of sort of reading the scripts and deciding which ones to jump with. And I think it's also, it's, you know, comedy is so important in terms of a sort of, you know, God, British comedy. We do it so well, don't we? And I think, again, we're here to bring that sort of creative sort of hub for comedy. And I think we're such an important part of the kind of cultural comedy scene in the UK. And I take that very seriously. I think that is what we're here to do. So, again, making people feel that, you know, it's not just about the overnights. It's about being that creative place where we can play.
It's a way of binding affection to the channel as well, isn't it? I think when you get a comedy right, then suddenly it's sort of
a lot of it.
It's beating hard.
It's one of the most
your year,
important. It can define your year, but also for audiences, that love for the BBC absolutely shows through its comedy. It's not just drama and entertainment and factual. You know, comedy is a big thing. I mean,
they're the things you almost remember most from like your childhood. You actually, the comedy is the ones you come to first.
And you know, people want to watch them again and again and again and again. You know, it's unlike any other genre, isn't it?
Shane,
big
for
fan.
people here today looking for commissions, I mean, obviously, you know, I would say exactly what you want, but can you give us a sense of what you're looking for at the moment?
Yeah, well, so one of the things we really want to try and crack more of, because a lot of comedy plays sort of 9:30 on a Friday, and it's a big pressure. We want to sort of try and crack the pre-Watershed, family-friendly comedy, so stuff, and we're looking as to where that audience might be. So we're having that discussion at the minute. Is that going to be in a different slot on a different night? So really, really want to do, and of the ones you saw there, Tim Vine feels very, very broad. The one with Spencer Jones, who's, a lot of these people are up here, go and see their shows. So trying to do the family thing, because I think trying to get those younger audiences, and you know, BBC Three will only take you so far, but I think that those young things you can watch as a family, that I remember watching the original Up on All Hours with family, and so trying to find those pieces that unite a family.
See, by the way, Charlotte, in terms of the iPlayer had a separate commissioning budget, didn't it? Am I right in thinking that that's gone now?
Yeah, it was a small budget, and in a way, I think obviously everything goes on to iPlayer, and you know, iPlayer is still a real destination for people. But I think it's really important that we bring our pieces to the biggest audience, and that's obviously what we can do through our channels. So it was really important to me that we look at our kind of budgets in terms of what we're doing on each channel. Where we can make the most impact. So we've just sort of changed.
Get people to watch the actual television first, and then get them to go over to iPlayer. Yeah. But you're still doing the box set thing, right? Where you put one episode out and then the rest
we're experimenting with how we make sure that, you know, we all know people want to watch what they want to watch when they want to watch it, and I think it's really important that we have that opportunity as well. And we also know there's been, you know, really extraordinary change in viewing habits, where it used to be catch up over 7 days. Now it's catch up over 28 days. Yeah. So, you know, something like Taboo, yes, it was a hit on the overnight, but my God, it grew over the 7. And by 28, we were getting bigger and bigger. It was the biggest we've ever had for a drama on iPlayer. So I think, we're absolutely, and again, you know, we're doing it with Quacks, we're doing it with White Gold, we did it with Carshare, where we know people like to watch in different ways. We won't do everything, because I think, again, that talkability is a really important part of what BBC One can do to grow a show.
And it's also that thing of like the overnights are now sort of not hallowed. Yeah, they're a tiny part of what's a bigger picture, isn't it?
They're often an indicator. They do tell us something, but they're not, you know. And it's all about whether a show's growing. It's not about what it is, you know. Just on an overnight.
Let's meet someone else.
Yeah.
This is like the worst This Is Your Life for you ever, isn't it?
This is my life. This is like one of our routines, isn't it? Nice having you all out together. It's good.
Yeah, let's bring on another of Charlotte's colleagues. This is the head of factual commissioning at the BBC. Please welcome Alison Kirkham.
Alison.
Hi, how you doing? Welcome, Alison. I'll come over this way a bit.
I feel very far away.
He's a long way.
Hello.
Hi, Alison.
Hi.
You've had a very good year, right? You had a sort of clean sweep at the BAFTAs. Tell us about the last year in BBC Factual.
No, it's been good. We've had a good year. The BAFTAs were nice. I think what's been really lovely is that there's been success across the range, and I think there's sometimes this misconception with big, broad channels that it's hard to do complicated, nuanced, challenging subjects, and we've demonstrated that it is possible on BBC One. If I'm thinking about the highlights, I mean, I think the two that really stand out for different reasons are the Rio Ferdinand documentary. And if you think about what we're trying to do on BBC One, it is a big, broad audience, and so we've got to land on topics that are sort of universal and become part of the national conversation. And there's nothing more universal than bereavement. And what we were able to do with that was I think actually spark a really sort of moving and poignant and complicated conversation around bereavement, but take it to a really broad audience by coming at it from talent who you wouldn't perhaps expect to be quite so candid. And then, of course, the other highlight is Planet Earth 2.
Of course.
And, you know, Tom MacDonald and Mike Gunter and the Natural History Unit did an extraordinary job. And it's very easy to look back on that and think, well, it was always going to do well. But actually, there's a risk to bring something back and to brand it as version number 2. And, you know, what we were trying to do was almost capitalise and create an ongoing brand there. And that was much more sophisticated programming than I think people realise. A lot of thought went into how those stories of life and death in the animal world actually, again, could sort of shine a light and provoke conversation around how we all live on this shared planet. And it was really, really gratifying and rewarding to see it do so well.
It's also, I can't think of a better example of a show that you watch across the generations, that you can watch it with your kids, and you can watch it with your grandparents, and absolutely everybody.
Well, Charlotte was talking about it earlier, and actually it's interesting, both those things I point to did really well with 16 to 34.
Yeah,
so I think Planet Earth, you know, any one episode did better amongst 16 to 34s than the X Factor final. And you know, we can't hide behind it being hard to bring 16 to 34s. We can do it, and we are doing it, and that continues to be our ambition and our challenge to ourselves.
It's funny, isn't it, these kind of cliches set in that you start to believe, even though they have no factual basis. Like, people tend to say 16 to 34-year-olds don't watch telly. And you hear that a lot, right? They don't watch telly anymore. They do watch telly, and a lot of them do.
Yeah, and there, you know, we have to be clever about the ways we do it. So, you know, both with Planet Earth and with Rio, we used our digital content really, I think, in quite a clever, sophisticated way to bring audiences to it. So with that documentary, you know, the short that we had created, it had something like 17 million views the night before TX. And I remember sort of calling Charlotte and saying, is anyone going to watch 17 million people who've already... And actually... You reach young audiences, and then you can pull them back in the digital space, and you can pull them back into linear. Yeah. People will still come. They will come in big numbers if you offer them the right thing.
You know, when you talk about you start a conversation with the shows, we've discussed a couple of times up here, how do you measure, so after the Rio documentary goes out, how do you measure the conversation that's happening?
It's so different for different shows. You know, you do think sometimes you can see that it's got a really sort of big audience. It's really prominent on Twitter, or it's getting lovely reviews, and all of those things are great. Sometimes you'll do things that have a smaller audience that you're incredibly proud of. Like, one of the things I'm most proud of this year actually is the film about Mark Duggan. Again, you know, that confounds people's expectations of BBC One, that we would take on something that's sort of challenging and tell that kind of story and put it right in the heart of primetime television. So it didn't have as big an audience, but to us that feels like success, because people talk about risk a lot, and that was a risk to do something like that on BBC One. I was proud that together we took that risk and did it.
I think the range of what we can do in Factual is one of the most exciting things, whether it's from science and history with Forces of Nature and Lucy Worsley, but it's also giving a voice to people, actually. And I think some of the shows that we've done which really have given a voice and to communities that don't often have that voice, whether it was The Last Minds, whether it was, you know, our mental health season, I think that is a critical part of what we do. We reflect the nation back, and we also allow people to have a voice on BBC One. Just thinking about some of the new things, Alison, we've got that you might want to talk about. We've got...
Well, you have
about the new announcements that
documentary.
Yeah, so we've got two documentaries that we're announcing today, one about Grenfell Tower and one about Stephen Lawrence. And people always ask what you're looking for on BBC One, and like I said, I think it's those, there are sort of these pivot points in history through which we see history, and I think moments like, you know, Stephen Lawrence's murder and the events at Grenfell, they become moments where we all remember where we were, and we all sort of see history through those points in time. Like Charlotte said, you know, you are giving voice to different communities. If I think back to the McTaggart yesterday, and Jon Snow rightly sort of calling us all to action and encouraging us to speak, to give voice. Actually, when we talk about representation a lot, we talk about sort of presenters on screen and diversity on screen. Actually, often I think it is about giving voice and alighting on subjects that the media too often ignore. And with both of those documentaries, incredibly important moments in time that we will continue to look back on, I'm sure, and will change sort of public policy, and did, you know, with Stephen Lawrence, partial repeal of double jeopardy. So really, really proud. They're ambitious, they're complicated, they're challenging. I would urge you all, I've never done this before, but encourage people to read a press release. But the quote that Doreen Lawrence gives for that Stephen Lawrence documentary, when she talks about it being the definitive piece that will look at the past quarter of a century and the impact it had on her and her her family, but actually on society and how she's, you know, she's really, that woman and her campaign and bravery has changed the whole narrative of racism within the police force. It's really, really extraordinary. So.
Well, and to talk about Grenfell for a second as well, in terms of, you know, pivotal events. I mean, that one of the pivotal events of Britain's, you know, sort of post-war history, isn't it, Grenfell? And there you have. Do you get nervous when you're commissioning a show like that? Because there are just so many facets to that. It's so sensitive. There are so many different angles. There are so many places you could go with it.
No, I think that's what gets me out of bed in the morning. I mean, sort of the more complicated it is, the more interesting it is. And we're genuinely lucky that we work in an era at the BBC where risk is thrown around casually like it's good in of itself, but there's a real bravery at the moment, and we want to take risks. I mean, I think that was a no-brainer. Claire Sillery commissioned it. You know, the team is being made by Minnow, a brilliant production company.
What's the angle?
Well, they were on the ground right from the moment, and they started to film. Before they had a commission, they were filming and capturing stories, and the film will continue to follow these individual stories. Again, comes back to the point, you know, we are trying to find ways to give voice to people on, you know, the margins of society who might feel that they aren't represented. It will follow their stories over the year. It will also sort of examine how social media was used in a really interesting way to bring these communities together.
Yeah.
So it's the personal and the harrowing sort of reflections of there was a very, very bright light shone at it at the time, wasn't it? But what's happened since then, and how
I think
these
quite
people...
often, Alison, don't we? We often talk about with these sort of landmark pieces that we feel like we're going behind the headlines. We're telling you the story that you don't know. We don't do it just to kind of go, oh, let's just do it on that subject. We really interrogate and want to know. So what perspective are you going to tell us that we don't know? And whether that's Diana's 7 days, you know, going on this Sunday, where you're getting it from a very unique personal perspective, or whether that was Mark Duggan or, you know, the abused, we really try and put you think you know the story, but this is the bit you don't know.
Well, I feel like that with a lot of major news events now, that news comes at us so thick and so fast that there will be
We move on. The cycle moves so quickly.
There'll be a terrorist atrocity, and I think, oh, now we've moved on, but what happened to those people that were injured badly but survived? Where are they now? What are they doing? And that's partly what you're trying to do with Grenfell.
Yeah, it's like people consume news like popcorn. It's like, what's the next snack? What's the next snack? And we do have to continue to sort of confound people's expectations or understanding.
Well, to give me an example of a risk, you use the word risk. What's a risk that you've taken?
God, there's, you know, I think...
It's the biggest risk of the last year that you've taken.
It feels like every day. I don't know, I think it was brave. I mean, it's not necessarily something we're pointing to, but, you know, with Forces of Nature, we put sort of astrophysics in the heart of BBC One primetime. That felt quite risky. Like, are families going to come? Are people going to come? Do they want to see physics at 9 o'clock on BBC One? Turns out that they do. You know, that's great.
I certainly do.
Yeah, and I think Wild Alaska, you know, that live programme was covering a massive area in Alaska with us being live 3 times. I mean, that was quite terrifying. Again, it's always easier in hindsight. They don't feel quite so risky when they were.
Everything, you know, the Diana documentary.
Tell us about that quickly, because that's what I've got to get 2 more genre heads on before we finish. But that is this Sunday, right?
Yes,
and this is the Princess talking to BBC One, on BBC One, for the first time in detail about her death and the funeral.
Yeah, and I think they've talked a lot, and you know, ITV had a beautiful documentary, and you know, they've done print interviews, so we feel like we've heard from them, but actually what we haven't heard from them about is what happened in that week. How did they feel when they were told the news their mother died? How did they come to the decision to walk behind her coffin? What were they thinking and feeling when the public was sort of demanding that they were there and sort of grabbing out to touch them? And were we, I think it asked really interesting questions about, on reflection, did we, the British public, were we making legitimate demands on these two boys? And that it does exactly that. We think we know the story. It's a story we're so familiar with. I'd really urge you to watch it.
What's the standout thing they say? What's really stuck with you when you watched it?
What's really stuck with me is, you know, I remember at that time, I felt like I knew her, I felt like I knew them. I was sort of complicit in everyone, like, why aren't the royal family down here? We need to hear from them. And you step back and you think, these boys were 12 and 15, and as a community and a society, we need to sort of ask ourselves about, are the demands we are placing on public figures legitimate or not? You know, we sort of get this sort of mob mentality, and we lose sight of what's compassionate and decent.
And there are 2 of many interviewees in that.
Yeah,
and it's actually quite it takes
Blair,
you back into
Blair's
that
in
moment,
it.
but it's utterly compelling.
Campbell, you've got the most senior person from the Buckingham Palace who's ever talked about it. Blair, Campbell, her friends. It's a real ensemble piece.
You know, made by filmmaker Henry Singer, who you know.
I need to bring out the next person. I'm sorry, I'm going to take an executive decision and drop your clip because we're slightly short time. But you were going to show us Ambulance.
Ambulance on tonight. It's really beautifully made. I would urge everyone to watch it.
Ambulance is on tonight. Okay,
Yes.
Thank you, Alison. Let's bring on our next genre head. Please welcome the head of Drama Commissioning, Piers Venga. Sorry, Alex, we're running out of time over. Hi, Piers, how you doing? Good to see you, Piers. Welcome to our stage.
There are some benefits to being on near the end.
With your
About 5
Doctor Who
minutes left.
music. I like that.
Lovely music, and you're going to have
Good
to talk
choice.
very quickly.
Yes.
You've been in the job, I think, since, is it November?
Yeah.
You've commissioned quite a lot. Tell us about the sort of your biggest commission so far.
We just announced 2 new commissions last week. The Serpent, which tells the story of Charles Sabraj, who was a prolific serial killer in the 70s in Thailand. It's a brilliantly compelling true crime story written by Richard Warlow. We've got The Three, which is by Peter Strawn, adapted from Sarah Lotz's novel, which is a big international thriller with a supernatural twist to it. A Suitable Boy, the first time Vikram Seth novel set in 1950s India, has been adapted by Andrew Davis. Little Women, War of the Worlds. We've got Russell T Davies telling the Jeremy Thorpe story, starring Hugh Grant, Carey Mulligan in Collateral. It's an enormous slate, and that's the great privilege of doing the job.
You've also started doing co-productions with the big American broadcasters. The Night Manager was made with AMC. Tell me a bit about, do you lose any creative control if you do a deal with AMC and they're putting a lot of money to, do you lose some creative, because they have to have a say as well, right?
I just think the whole notion of us having creative control is such a joke, to be honest.
What do you mean?
Because we don't control the creatives. The writers write and the producers produce, and we largely act as enablers. And
You must step in a bit. I mean, you're responsible for the money, right? You must step in, you must have a say in casting, for example?
We spend a long time developing ideas, and we tend to, producers tend to go to market with those ideas once they've been commissioned by the BBC. So there is a very, it's a very clear sense of what a piece is before you go into into that process of actually making it. So actually, in truth and in practice, there's very little disagreement or conflicts.
Piers, you've worked at Doctor Who and BBC Wales and Channel 4 and a range of places. You're now looking after all the BBC drama. Are you naturally the sort of person that would watch, say, Casualty or EastEnders?
My first job in TV was working on an ITV daytime soap. I produced single dramas. I've worked on Doctor Who channel. I mean, I've got incredibly broad taste. I think someone once described it as eclectic, which just sounded like a backhanded way of saying weird. But no, I love all drama.
The casting of the new Doctor and Jodie Whittaker, the first female Doctor, was that? Were you? I assume you're both involved in that decision. Tell us, take us inside that decision. How did it work?
Chris has a very, very clear sense of where he wants to take the show, and has a very clear sense of the sort of qualities that he's looking for in his Doctor, and Jodie fitted with that. Obviously, he had a relationship with her from Broadchurch, but she read for the part. She auditioned for it, and she came back a few times, and she herself has a very, very clear sense of what the point of having a female Doctor and what she wants to do with that role. And I think she will make her unexpected, but iconic.
Yeah. And when Chris told us about it, we just went, God, that's inspired, that's brilliant.
Did you give a steer? Did you say, Chris, I think it's probably time we had a female Doctor? No, not at all.
No, I just think, again, I think what Piers is saying about what we uniquely, I think, can do at the BBC is really offer real creative freedom for writers and talent. Yeah. That's why I think they love coming to work for the BBC. Of course, our job is to then have those creative conversations, and in the best possible way. I mean, they're some of the most enjoyable meetings, aren't they, when we're going, oh, I love that, but what if we did that, and how about that? And writers love that as well. I think they can see the excitement we have in a piece or an idea. So, discussing with Chris what he wants to do with Doctor Who is just a joyful meeting where we all pitch in, and I put in my comments.
One of the best things about the job was coming back and going to Stephen Moffat's last read-through, but also being here for Chris's first one. I was there at the very beginning of Stephen's time, and it was an amazing experience. Yeah. And
there's nothing like hearing Stephen Moffat telling you about what he's about to do with his next show. It's utterly exciting.
We're going to bring on a clip here. Saran Jones, who herself has been in Doctor Who, I think with Matt Smith.
She has.
Is in Dr. Foster 2. We're going to have a look at a clip. Tell us a bit about this, Piers.
Well, I mean, everything you saw last year, it's kind of, it hits the ground running. I think Charlotte's already said that. It's extraordinary. Mike is totally in control of his craft. He really knows what made that show compelling. She is an amazing character, and Saran just aces it.
Great.
First episode.
Here's a clip of Dr. Foster 2. Wow, it's a great show.
It's very rude. Don't watch it on the tube. My advice.
Piers, tell us a bit about, for the people in the room today who might want to come and pitch to you, tell us about the sort of things that you are looking for at the moment.
I think I'm thinking a lot about the kind of role drama plays in people's lives and the role that storytelling plays in people's lives. And, you know, I think there's an awful lot of very dark drama across all channels. And I would love to see some more inspiring stories. So I'd love a Sunday night show which examined heroism and what it means to be a hero. You know, midweek, I would love to be pitched more ideas that take us into entertaining worlds that might even be aspirational. We've got the Split, Abby Morgan's series about divorce lawyers, and it just feels, you know, watching the rushes and assemblies of that show, it just feels really exciting to be in a world which isn't about dead bodies. Press, Mike Bartlett's next show, which examines the kind of changing world of news reporting and journalism. I think there's something fascinating about both of those worlds, and it just feels really it feels really exciting not to just be inside a straightforward procedural.
So it's less dark.
Yeah, I think there has to be a mix. I think sometimes, you know, I mean, we need to go to very dark places to, you know, take stories apart to understand the world and understand the way the world is changing around us. But I just think we need a better mix.
Yeah, I mean, we'll continue to do dark, complex pieces that really challenge and provocative. And of course, some of the announcements today, The Cry, The Victim, 2 Scottish series we're doing Jeff Pope's new series we're doing about Stephen Paul. Yeah, so we feel like we will continue to do that. But I think varying the pace and tone and the kind of precincts that we kind of operate in is really exciting and really fun. And, you know, we've got this enormous kind of slate and opportunity on BBC One. And I guess our biggest thing, Piers, isn't it, is always say, don't second guess and think, oh, we know what BBC One drama is, because I hope you all feel like you really don't, and you don't know what's coming next. You know, I think Taboo really kind of surprised people, and we want to make sure that next year we're surprising you know, with something else equally as tonally different. So it is always, isn't it? It's about varying the tone and using the opportunities.
Do your departments work together in the sense that you both might tell the same story in a different way?
We come together.
Yeah.
Factory dramas like Stephen Lawrence.
Damalola,
I Love Boy was we worked together on that. Yeah, we do.
Let's bring out our final genre head joining us on stage today. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the BBC Controller of Entertainment, Kate Phillips. Hi, Kate. What would you like to say? Why don't you come on the main sofa in the middle? Sit down, relax.
So like Phil and Holly.
Maybe next year, Kate, you could be on Strictly. Just
I wish. I wish.
Oh, good.
We're going to overrun a little bit. We're allowed to go till 10:37. I'm just warning you if anyone needs to get
I'm
anywhere
glad
else.
I'm out here now. It felt like we were in The Apprentice backstage, the four of us, waiting for the boardroom. Sir Alan will see you now. Shane had his big wheelie case.
Yeah.
Kate, tell us a bit about, I mean, this is it's a hard genre, isn't it, in which to find big new hits. Like you say, you've walked out there to Strictly, and there you're on, I think, season 14 of Strictly. Yep. And, you know, another Strictly hasn't been found. It's hard to find those big hits.
It is, and it's across all broadcasters, it's internationally.
Yeah.
It's really, really hard, but we have to keep trying, particularly the BBC, I think, where we have to be distinctive and innovative. We're never going to stop trying to develop new ideas and give things a go. And I've been in the job almost a year now. It's been brilliant. Charlotte's been brilliant. She's been like, just go for it. You know, there's no limits in terms of slots and specific needs. Just try lots of stuff. So since I started, I mean, we've put over 50 ideas into paid development.
Have you?
Yeah, and across all, you know, primetime Saturday night, sort of quiz, panel, everything.
I think, you know, Sing All Round to Mrs. Brown's and Michael Mack's Big Show both come out as standout new hits. To get 2 hits in a year.
Yeah.
I think it gave us a real confidence to go, right, okay, so we've really kind of marked that. Let's really kind of push ourselves to do something entirely different.
But I'll tell you the learnings from that, which is really interesting, is when you're looking at launching new entertainment hit, Mrs. Brown and Michael Mack both have big talents. at their heart, and that does really help get your eyeballs on the show. And I'd say internationally as well, the big shows that have landed, if you look at sort of Lip Sync Battle or Steve Harvey's Big Shot, Little Short, or even World of Dance, they've grown through Jimmy Kimmel or YouTube or something, they've had a platform to grow, or they've got a J-Lo, a Steve Harvey, a big name at their heart. And but those two things really help land a new format.
But there are very few big, shiny floor entertainment shows anywhere in the world that are coming through, right?
Yeah, I mean, they are coming through, but like I said, I think that they have to be allowed to have time to grow. We're in an era of social media now, where sort of everyone's on Twitter straight away and sort of passing judgment, and you're just like, just give things a chance.
Would you take a format from America, or does it now have to be a BBC origination? So if, say, World of Dance over on NBC, as you say, doing well with J-Lo, would you, with BBC money, would you be willing to buy an American format?
Always, if the idea is incredibly sort of distinctive and must-have, then yes, we would look at foreign formats.
We'd never say no, would we?
But we'd never say no. But I think we do want to have our own homegrown stuff. So World of Dance, I did look at. Obviously, it did really well on NBC, and it is a great show. But it's got a $1 million prize. It's got J-Lo at its heart. It's a very big, expensive show. So, so if I took something like that, I'd probably be back to where we were with The Voice, where you're using a huge amount of money on one show.
And you come in for a lot of criticism. There's a higher danger in terms of
I don't care
about that?
I don't care about criticism. I care about the audience and giving the audience the best shows. I really couldn't give a stuff about that. It's just, what are the great shows we can get on television? So, but I do believe that the UK is still the biggest exporter of formats and origination, and actually the best ideas are in this room, are in this city, or in this country.
And second guessing is the same as what we've been saying. Second guessing what's going to be the next hit. So if we would sort of to limit ourselves on certain genres and certain ways and sort of do things. So you maybe want to talk about the new one that you're announcing today, Kate, The Button.
I am
which again
We're
is
going to play a clip of this, aren't we? Yeah. Tell us what is The Button?
Do you want to see? I don't know whether to do the clip first.
Do the clip first. Do the clip first.
Have a look at the clip.
Okay. Here we go. Okay.
There is the great British public.
Well, and this is that is a show where actually we haven't got big name talent, and it hasn't sort of grown on the internet or anything. So again, we look very carefully at where we place it.
But what is it? I've no idea what's going on.
Okay, so basically, Kate, what is it? Okay, so basically, it was pitched to Charlotte and I, and we both loved the idea, so we gave them a pilot to do it. And the idea is that you've got 5 families across the UK in their homes.
Yeah.
Now, entertainment shows in family homes are not a new idea. You go back, I used to work on Down Your Doorstep on The Big Breakfast, you've got Ant and Dec Takeaway, you've got Noel's House Party, but they've all been strands in bigger shows. And this was the whole show was going to be set in these families' living rooms. And they're 5 families, they have a box in their living room with a button, and it's there all day, and at any point in the day, that button can start flashing. When it flashes, you've got to hit it, and you start the game. And you've got 5 boxes, 5 buttons, and they all start flashing at the same time. And what's brilliant, and Andy Devonshire and Alex Horn have sort of created this between them, is that the families forget the box is there. They genuinely forget. So they've got like a child on button watch, but if any of you have children, their attention span is like that. And so they go off, you've got a couple go, oh look, pole dart's on tonight, I can't wait, and this button's flashing in the corner, and you're just shouting out, push the bloody button, start the game. Then they all start the game, it's a ridiculous challenge, and then they have to complete it in the quickest time, and they have to do it correctly, and then they hit the button again to say they've completed it, and then they wait for the scores, and they get to see what the other families have done. Right. So they get very competitive, and it's just joyful. And when I look at entertainment shows now, it's really hard because I get pitched so many good ideas from all of you, but I think what makes it stand out, and I looked at that and it had a really good show has to make me, I think, either shout or shiver. And by that I mean shiver as in hairs in the back of my neck, oh my God, that's amazing, or laugh out loud, incredible, or I'm literally shouting at the screen. And The Button actually did both those things. It was very funny. And there's a great bit when they've got loads of inflatables on their doorstep, and the challenge is, open your front door, whatever's out there, get it in your front room as quickly as possible. So there's all these inflatables, you saw some of them there. I mean, it's just hilarious. One girl's still eating her tea and isn't even helping the family at this point. She's sort of given up. And they're getting the inflatables in, and the last one is a giant football, and they're all trying to push it through the front door.
And they take it so
and
seriously.
You're just there. I take it seriously. I'm just there going, just pop it, bloody well pop it. Why are you trying to push it? So you're trying to, it's great.
I mean, it looks like nothing else, right, as well.
Yeah,
I mean, that's
yeah.
part of the appeal of it, I guess.
It's great, and I'm really excited about it.
And less expensive than World of Dance.
Well, less expensive, but again, it was one of those shows, it was more expensive than Tea Time Tower if it wasn't quite prime, but Charlotte was great. She went, forget about that, it's a good show, commission it, and we'll find somewhere for it. And I think that's really important with entertainment.
And Kate, I know you've touched there on sort of shout or shiver, but again, for the people here who are looking to come to you as they are looking to come to many of the genre heads here, what is it? Give us more of an idea of, right now, the sort of thing that you're looking for.
It's big primetime Saturday night is always the sort of the golden ticket, and we'll keep trying ideas in that slot. We've had some great stuff coming through this year. We've got some really good shows. We'll announce another one next week, happening next year. But these shows take a long time to develop, and I want to try and avoid rushing and sort of hitting transmissions. So we're looking at developing now big Saturday night shows that may not be on screen until 2019, but you know, we want to get them right. So I'd say Saturday night is still the sort of big priority for us.
Thank you guys. I could have sat here for like 2 or 3 hours and just kept going and going and going and going. It's fascinating, and thank you all for coming up here and coming and sitting out here and talking with us all. We're going to close. I'm sorry, I wish I could have spoken to you for a bit longer as well, Kate. But we're going to close with a clip of Blue Planet. So we're going to look at a clip of Blue Planet.
David's session I think is a bit later, isn't it? But I think Blue Planet is...
I think David Attenborough is on in an hour and a half. He's on at around midday. I think if you want to go and see David Attenborough. We must thank our sponsors, the excellent Broadcast, for making this happen. Blue Planet will play in a second, but first, please put your hands together for the entirety of the BBC. For Kate and Shane and Piers and Alison and Charlotte Moore.
Thank you.